PMFers, who's got that product market fit? All right, all right, all right, all right, all right. I'm here with Zach Herring, another
Amazing.
PMFer, a good buddy of mine. How you doing, Zach? How you feeling?
I'm good. I'm really good. I'm excited to be on, I would argue, the best theme song in crypto podcasting.
Awesome. Hell yeah.
I listened to it
Hell
today. I
yeah.
was like, that's
Yeah.
delightful. This is
I just
fantastic.
sang a little thing and that's it. Yeah.
I love it.
I did 2 takes and sent them both and we went with it.
They picked the best one. They picked the best one because it's
They're both
fantastic. I'm really
they're
excited.
both very silly. Okay, so first question, it's kind of your intro. How did you learn how to build?
Oh, that's a great question. I have always been a tinkerer. I've always like I guess I should take a step back. Like I've always like wanted to make things. I think like even when I was like as young as like 3 or 4 years old, I like drew not just single drawings but comics and stapled them together and like handed them to my dad to read, even though there were no words on it. And so to me, like there's like something really cool about self-expression, about like producing an artifact that is, I don't know, like a unique expression of like what you want to build and put out in the world. So I feel like I've always been building, even though a lot of it is kind of like tinged towards the I would say like the artistic side. And then how did I learn how to build like code specifically? Fandom. I'm old. And so Jedi Knight, there's like a video game called Jedi Knight. And I learned how to build a fan site for that. And so it was just kind of like a continuous extension. Like I built a thing and like handed that someone could like interact with and see. And like, this is an expression of my love for XYZ thing. And so that was like my first sort of like foray into building digital artifacts and digital experiences as like self-expression.
The first time I built web apps was like in a Counter-Strike game where we had stats and
Ooh,
we wanted everyone at the university to be able to get their stats, right? It was like this necessity kind of thing. And I mean,
yeah.
I had like a math teacher that taught me how to code like way, way, way young, which is awesome. But, okay, so you
Awesome.
alluded to your dad being your first user, which I think is really,
Yeah.
really, really cool and awesome. What were the first things that you built? And I think you kind of answered this, but maybe we could get into it. What were the first things that you built that people used? Because I think there is this, yes, you're a
Mhm.
builder, building is building, but
Yeah.
there's this kind of like other piece to this. And it's almost like why we do this. And it's the
Yeah.
users, people actually using the thing. It's super exciting for someone to use the thing that you build to do something new, right? So who are
Yeah.
your first users? Can you
Yeah.
even,
My dad,
your
my
dad?
parents were the
That's
first
amazing.
users, right? Like, you know, you
Yep.
draw something, they put it up on they put
Yep.
the thing up on the fridge. That's your
You
first
get
audience,
the,
right?
yep. Yep.
There's it's really like I mean, I don't know, this is like very there's like two different sides to me. There is the like dead eye product person who's just like, does it solve a problem and are we getting people to da, da, da? And I think that's really important to think about, especially whenever I think like especially within crypto, because it is so dollar and cents. Like you can always look at the end of a transaction and determine whether or not you have come out ahead. So it's important to like have that mindset. But I think there's also a lot of romance in at like self-expression and like providing like a really interesting and unique experience. Like with artists, the audience is as much a participant in the act of creation as the artist. It's not just enough to make a film. Someone needs to watch it and then emotionally respond to it for the film to be good. And I think there's something there as well. And like your users, I think especially if you want to talk about like kind of like the cooler things that you can do on chain, and that's partly why I even care about this. You like there's just an incredible like interaction with the audience member and the thing that you built. And crypto is really powerful because of that piece of ownership sort of thing. So yeah, I strongly agree. Like I have so many thoughts, so many opinions on like who that first user is and like why it's even meaningful in the first place to have someone like interact with the thing. But yeah, parents were the first people. And then like I would say like I did a anthology of storytelling. We would pick 3 words, and then we would I recruited people to build to like do anthologies around like these. We call them 3-word challenges. So it's like 3 pages, three words, 3 pages, 3 months to do it. And also a lot of like the first users were like people who were also, and this is kind of like reflected in crypto as well, they're also like believers in the art form. And so like, to me, like that's like one of the best places to find people as your first users are like the fans of the medium itself. Like even like the fan site I had mentioned, like hanging out on forums and like other people who love it. You just said like the Counter-Strike thing, like the people who are playing Counter-Strike with you, those are like, yeah, I think it's like the initial audience is the fellow enthusiasts.
And your mom and dad were your first believers, which I think is
That's
also
true.
awesome.
Yeah.
And crypto users are specifically weird because you can build something that's completely public and anyone can get to, and it's completely permissionless. People can build on it anyway, but you don't know exactly who they are. And you just like put something out there and all of a sudden you see. So that leads to my next question of what things have you built on chain that people used?
Yeah, I mean, the one that's by far gotten the most use and has been people have used the longest has been BasePaint, right? Which is
So cool.
It's a thing that myself and Winter, co-founder, we built in 2023. It's a shared pixel art canvas. Anyone can come in, mint a brush. That brush is an NFT. It's a 721. It controls how many pixels you are allowed to put on this shared pixel art canvas. And then over 24 hours, this canvas kind of grows and it evolves, and it's kind of it's a collaborative art project with hundreds of artists every day. And then at the end of the 24 hours, that canvas is frozen and it's turned into an NFT, an open edition NFT that anyone can purchase. And then that money that is used to buy that digital copy is then sent to other artists, to the artists who made the artwork. So it's like a permissionless collaborative art project where artists are kind of rewarded for their effort day to day.
Thinking of mechanisms, a lot when we really get into building, there's like mechanisms here. What was there a VRGDA mechanism, or what was the mechanism of controlling people can just anybody buy as many brushes as they want, and then the brushes just have like a certain amount of dots that they can make? Is that how I think about it? Okay.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. There was no dynamic pricing system for it because, like, to me, like it was really important to. And people had like said, why aren't the brushes on auctions? Da, 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 da. And I think it's important to know what side of your market has money and what side doesn't. And artists rarely have any money. So like that's the point of being an artist, is to like, you could be making more money doing spreadsheets, but you choose to draw every day instead. And so, yeah, no, it was really important that like, basically I want it to be as low risk as possible for the artist to take a flyer and like mint a brush and then like paint some stuff. So yeah, the brushes have and can probably continue into the foreseeable future cost the exact same thing as a canvas. And so there's always that parity there. And the way that basically it's an honor system where like it's one artist per brush. We have like folks who kind of, it's pretty obvious whenever you like buy 20 brushes and try to spam. And so we kind of have like this decentralized community policing sort of thing where folks kind of say like, I think this person's really good, give them more pixels. And then they'll also say like, this person clearly has like 20 brushes and they're not really contributing. And so we kind of like go off of an honor system sort of thing there.
So that kind of hints at like the civil resistance problem that all crypto builders seem to have, is you either have this like verifiable human and therefore they're doxxed or something, or you let anybody, go at it. But if there's some kind of voting mechanism, can someone just create 20 accounts and make a vote? And it's something we always have to deal with on chain.
Yeah, exactly. The cool thing that we did, so we rolled out, I would say 6 or 12 months ago, and I really like it, is it used to be that we had like open brush mint. We had to kill that because people could squat on it like indefinitely. They would like buy a brush. Basically, we had like 2 or 3 people who were just like who were just spamming the mint counter for it. And they would squat on them and then they would like flip them on OpenSea for like 20x. And so what we ended up doing is we then created this idea around temporary art brushes. And so we reopened the open mint, and then we basically said any brush that has below a certain amount of pixels evaporates over time. So when you mint a brush, you have I think like 7 days or 12 days to like paint cool things. And generally speaking, the artists are really good. They want more artists, especially as we increase the canvas size. They want more artists to make more good art. and they'll point out the people who are like making really cool things. But the way that the evaporation happens, we basically like ruined the profit motive for squatting, flipping, and spamming, which is kind of a fun thing, which you really only get to when you, I guess like the thing, I think we would have never launched if we had tried to game out every red team, blue team. And so that's why I think like allowing things to evolve naturally and finding really interesting solutions to these problems is like one of my favorite things about continuing to work on a project versus launching a new thing.
And iterating based on human behavior and all sorts
Yeah.
of weird. So you alluded there to your market, and I think that's a clear thing that a product builder needs to have in mind, is the fact that the thing that you're deploying probably has at least two sides of a market to it.
Yes.
And you said squatting and spamming, like that's kind of part of it. There are buying and selling, but you even specifically said, you know, one side of your market may be rich and the other side of your market may be poor, and you need interaction from both of them. So you have to create your mechanisms and economy in a way that you know, nurtures that.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a really good book by Andrew Chen called The Cold Start Problem. It blew my mind whenever I read it. It's totally worth reading. And he basically points out it's extremely relevant to crypto because, like you said, there's always, it's coordination mechanism, which means there's always going to be two sides. It's two people trying to determine to do the thing trustlessly. And he basically outlines that you will always have a cold side of the market where like it's hard to do it. There will be one side of the market that it is more difficult to get them to do the thing that you want them to do than the other side, right? Like whether it's a collector, like a person who has money, who like, you have like 1,000 artists in the world who like all want to launch their own thing. You have like one collector with one ETH that he's willing to spend on it. That's the hard side of the market. And so that to me is like, I think there's two different aspects to it, which is like understanding what the hard side of the market is and then making that like feedback loop so that the hard side of the market is unblocked as much as possible and then can reward the easy side of the market, which then encourages them to like use it more. And there's just like a really, you think in terms of like virtuous feedback loops when you're building these products is like how I like to think about it.
That's great. Really good framing. A lot of good framing so far here. A lot of good mental models. Your Deadeye CEO and your romance self-expression, like you need both of those. You need both sides of the market. You need
they're at war within myself constantly.
Yeah, the wolves. And you feed them both too. That's good.
Yeah.
Okay. Here's the developer question. What is your stack?
Oh, I'm a frou artist. So I would say Scaffold ETH. Is my stack. Yeah. So like I've prototyped. So I didn't. So Winter wrote the smart contracts for BasePaint. The stuff that I have launched myself. So like smart contracts and like the full stack of things. I definitely start on Scaffold ETH because it's just I like tinkering. I am not like one of those people who like an idea emerges fully formed in my brain. I have to have like the code and then have like a really nice. Like basically the console output to like test different things, and I need buttons. I'm a designer, unfortunately. I need buttons.
And the idea changes 3 times as you're laying it out.
Exactly. Yeah. I do it like sculpture, man. Like I just I like layering something in and trying something and then layering it out. So Scaffold ETH is awesome. I really enjoy that. And then on top of that, it's kind of like the pretty boring like Next.js. Like I use Scaffold ETH to get the contract interactions correctly, and then I pretty quickly shift over to like a boring React Next.js application that then I'm like developing against the contracts that I have within the Scaffold ETH repo.
Nice. And technically you're supposed to do that out of the box, but I totally understand that like when you want to create something that a bunch of people are going to use, you almost want to start from scratch to make sure there's no extra. So Scaffold ETH comes with a lot of things and you're like, all right, now set that aside and let's make a very thin front end to make sure. And if we were to just guess at Winter writing those smart contracts for BasePaint, my guess is he's in Foundry and he's writing Solidity. Is that probably the right guess?
100%. Yeah. You can see so BasePaint like all of our contracts are open source. And so I think you can like actually check out our repo and how he worked on those.
Okay.
And I'm
Now the
pretty
next
sure it's
question.
Foundry and a couple of other things.
Yeah, that's what my guess would be, and I'll
Yeah.
try to bug him to come on the show too. So, thinking of ideas, how do you go about thinking of new ideas? When does the best idea come to you? How do you make space for it to happen? That kind of
Oh
thing.
man. The best ideas always happen when I am busy and can't execute on on them. It always comes at the worst possible time. I like, again, I'm like a tinkerer and I'm curious, and I think the best ideas for me start the best ideas. So I feel like I have the same ideas that everybody else has in a lot of ways, and I'm like, oh man, wouldn't it be cool if like wouldn't it be cool is usually how they start, and then it's usually like this sort of like elaborate, cathedral, right? And I'm like, oh man, and then like we did this, and then we could build this thing, and da 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 blah blah blah. But I feel like the ones that are like the best ideas tend to be around a really they're hyper focused around um the way that it makes someone feel when they click the button. And
Damn.
there's so many points where I'm just curious about, like, I haven't seen like a tap game on chain yet, right? Like I was, or like I haven't seen a clicker hero game like that, and they've kind of existed now, but like that was like something I was exploring for a little bit. I haven't seen this, so like I kind of like thinking about like what's that like smallest possible network? Like what if on a two-sided market, like what if I try to make it as small as possible network, and then I try to think in terms of like what's like the coolest way that someone can feel after they've clicked that button, because getting someone to look at your thing and understand what it is and then click the button is like already the hardest thing in the world. I think everyone should like build something creative that's not Web3 real, that's not Web3
Make
like
a
once in their
to-do
life.
list to start with.
Yeah,
Yeah,
make a
exactly.
to-do list
Yeah.
or something. But
Yeah.
like understand how difficult it is for people to pay attention to your thing when they don't think it's going to 10x gives you an incredible amount of appreciation for just how tight and small and narrow and just like focused the thing has to be in order to cut through the noise and get one person to emotionally respond to it. So that's where my head is at these days. It's just like, what's that tiny little awesome thing that I can put in front of someone and they feel good about it for 30 seconds or 45 seconds? And then what's the thing that I can do to get them to do it again? And like, that's kind of like the loop that I tend to think about.
Love that. Love that. That's great framing. Really good. And the to-do list, it's like you're your first user and
Yeah,
it needs to be delightful for you to use. Yeah.
exactly. Which is funny. I'm playing around with that right now. Actually, like I have a couple of to-do lists when I open up a blank browser,
Mhm.
and none of them are very good. They either like are super heavy or they require this stuff. So I'm literally doing that right now. And someone described why AI is magic. Like when you feel AI is like the most magic is when you're in an IDE and you hit tab and it auto completes a really complex thing. And I'm like, what if I could build the tab feeling from an IDE into a list? So when I say like, go do this thing, it feeds it in, and then it auto like stubs out all of the other things that I need to do in order to do this one thing. So that's kind of a good like in media res example of how I'm thinking about it. It's like I feel so good when I hit tab, when an AI anticipates what I want and can hit tab in this one context. Can I port that into a completely different context? It's kind of how I think about those things.
It feels like magic. Like every new technology, right? Some quote about like sufficiently
Yeah,
advanced technology feels like magic. Like it's so true.
exactly.
And if you've got something amazing, it feels a little bit like magic to the user. And that's such
Yes.
a good feeling as the creator. You're the wizard inventing the magic and putting it into someone else's hands, and then they get to experience it and use it. It's such a cool feeling.
It's so cool. It's the best thing in the world. And to me, like that's where we tend to forget. It's like with crypto, especially, it's like the UX. I feel like people have kind of like excused the UX in crypto for the last 7 years. Or like, oh, it's Web3, it's crypto, it's meant to be bad. Da, 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 da. But to me, like that aha moment, that magical feeling where you're like, oh my God. If you're not designing for that, then you're basically asking people to forget about. I mean, like to not even like complete the
Yeah.
user flow. They won't even see the value that you're trying to give them.
Unless the 10x thing, like the 10x
Exactly.
thing, like only drives some of the worst apps, kind of. Yeah. Okay.
Right.
So,
And it's
okay.
not sticky either. Like you
No.
build, I
Right.
hope it took
Oh,
you
oh,
a weekend
yep.
because
Yep.
it's not sticky.
Right. So having ideas is one thing. How about validating ideas? How do you validate an idea?
That's a great question. There's like three different ways to validate, and I think again, it's a framework. I think about it in terms of how much time I would have to build. How much time would I spend to just build it and put it in front of someone? Because that's the best way to validate something.
Like
Is
0
to
to
like
1
literally
type
build it.
situation.
Yeah,
Yep.
it's to make the thing and then hand it to them and
Yep.
then see if they like
Have
it.
them have that magic feeling. Yeah.
Exactly. And that is why like scoping the idea down is so important, because if you can get it scoped down into like a single thing, it is actually kind of like it's pretty possible, especially like as you put the reps in and get better and better at it. It feels pretty possible to scope out and build that magic thing in a weekend or a week or one of these like like one of these like smaller sort of things. Um, if it takes if it takes any longer than a week, then I would say like maybe then you like kind of like get into like the traditional UX PMF type stuff, right? Where it's just like you either look at like ancillary markets and you say like, do people use this in other contexts? Why do they use it in other contexts? What is this solving for them? Does it have like similar breakdowns? You can get really analytical with it. And then
This
like,
is your Deadeye CEO view.
this is my dead ICD.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, exactly. Like, am I accomplishing, how much time am I investing in this? And like, that to me is like that's where you start growing into that, into the analytical process.
What about just like pitching the idea to someone, Uber for X or something like that, and see if
I
everybody
okay.
just tells you
Sometimes,
that's a good idea? It's not, is that a trap?
yeah. There's two problems. Like you can either go one way or the other with that, right? Like there's a really good book called The Mom Test, and the idea is to like how to pitch people on an idea in such a neutral way that even your mom would tell you it's a bad idea, because your
Mm.
mom's like your fan, and so everything you're going to do, she's going to be a fan of. And that's actually a really good book. I would recommend that because people are either so they want you to succeed and they want you to like them, and that is more important to them than giving you honest feedback. But then there's another problem. It's called what's the name of the book? Creativity Inc. They talk about how basically they talk in Pixar how every good movie of theirs starts out as an ugly baby, and they're like,
Hmm.
be careful not to throw away ideas just because it starts out bad and ugly. You have to nurture. Sometimes you have to like spend time nurturing that idea. And so, so I have found this in specifically in like I would say like engineering focus, like heavily technical fields, that people will be quick to dismiss an idea because they have like already have like this highly attenuated mental model about how the world works. And so when you pitch them the thing, they may completely miss like how the nuances of how you're thinking about it and dismiss it out of hand because it doesn't fit. They're already like, oh, well, you do this and this and this and this. No, I don't like it. Right. And so I do think that pitching, it's like it's helpful in some respects, but I'm also like super hesitant not to have something that is like an artifact that expresses it's like the best expression of the aha moment, because otherwise, yeah, you run into like one or two things: either they're too nice to you or they're too mean to you. Basically, they throw out the baby.
That's a great. I mean, it's like something that I think we humans get just caught doing. We have an idea, and the first thing we say is like we pitch the idea to a couple people, and I think that your feedback is basically that they're mid and they're not going to even pick this up, or
Right.
that yeah. Okay, let's move on. How do you test and ship? What's your going to production look like, and how much do you test, and what do your tests look like?
Man, test and
Kind of in
prod,
this case,
like
like, yeah,
BasePaint, we've always,
Winter was writing the contract, so
yeah.
let's assume he's doing some testing. But then once that's solid and you need to test the app, how do you go about doing that maybe?
We actually for a couple of different things, we usually start with the app first while
Oh,
he starts shaping the solidity. Um,
cool.
Yeah, and I've done this for a couple of projects, and I think that to me is like, I mean, to me, like that's kind of again, like you start at like the aha moment. You start at the thing that's like really, really like supposed to give those people that kind of like uplifting
You
feeling. As
click the
fun as
button and
Solidity
it
is,
happens. Even if it's all in
yeah,
the front end, give them that first and then figure out how to for that to settle onto a contract.
exactly. Because like especially, I mean, like you spend enough time on chain, you know what's possible, what's not possible, like the trade-offs between like centralized and decentralized and all this other stuff. And so you can pretty easily build as if the constraints existed. So like even if you're just doing like a front end thing with the Firebase backend, like we've prototyped out a couple of games where I literally like it's meant to be on chain, but I literally just like wrote a backend, a pretty simple backend, and then we would just like kind of like here's how it's supposed to work, and like we'd fill that stuff out. So yeah, we with BasePaint specifically, we built out. We had like a shared canvas and like kind of like started like sketching around and playing around with that stuff. And then once we got that, we used that plus some wireframes to sort of like make sure that we had kind of like all the different pieces and we had the requirements for the contract. And then Winter went off and then wrote the contract. And then like that kind of like that's where we got closer to that production. But first we were testing out like the front end experience.
It honestly makes so much sense because you can imagine the opposite of that, where you write the perfect contract that has the perfect mechanism in it, and then you finally get it audited, and then you get the front end built, and you use it a couple times, and it's just terrible to use.
Exactly.
Unless you're
And then
going to
you're
have
like,
that 10x thing, you're done. Yeah.
exactly. And then you're like, oh, I should have built this instead,
This
or we should
first.
have changed
Yep.
this. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Winter's amazing at that. Like that's one of the things I've learned from him is he's such a cracked Solidity dev, and yet he
Product.
like I sketched out another thing. Yeah, I was sketching out like kind of an idea, and he's like, okay, this is very funny. This is really interesting. Like in Solidity, he's like, this is very funny. This is very interesting. He's like, but like, don't even focus on this now. Like, we need to figure out if like the front end experience of this is even like valid, because we can get the Solidity to do whatever we want in like whatever way. So yeah, like I think that's something I've learned from him, and it's been so helpful in terms of prototyping out stuff.
And to jump on something you said earlier that's right on the line, it's about that moment when they get it, and then it's about that loop about getting them to do it again, sort of. And if you have that just in HTML, basically HTML and JS, give them the magic moment and have the game loop, and then work backwards from that. That's great advice.
Because especially like, I mean, like think about it this way. Like I feel like crypto's both superpower as well as like Achilles heel is the financialization of everything. It's really easy to slap a 10x token on something and then just kind of like expect people to flock to it. But real resiliency of a product, if you want something to last, like if you're building something for a weekend, that's totally cool. Like think about it in that way. Think about it in terms of an ephemeral app. I think there's a lot of validity to this theory of that. But if you want to build for something that is like, you create a ritual around it, like someone
love that
like
word.
They open up Duolingo and they do the thing and they get the streak and they get the points and da 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 da. Like these are like feedback loops and rituals that you are like wanting people's whose lives are already very complex and very crowded. You're asking them to space out a little bit of that time for your thing that you're building for them. It's important to make sure that that feedback loop is as cool and as pleasurable as possible, because then like tokens on top, like that's just kind of like that's the icing on the cake, really.
I love this. A lot of good frameworks, and I love the idea of the ritual and having people build up rituals and making a fun ritual and starting with the ritual. So, okay, a little tangent here. How has AI changed the way you build things? Are you using AI all the time now?
Yes.
Awesome.
Like when we started BasePaint, like I would design things and I would make CSS changes because I was too afraid to make like real JavaScripty type things. And like as soon as I realized I could start copy pasting from ChatGPT
first, yeah.
yeah. I was just like, I went from prototyping out. I had one game I wanted to build. It would have taken me it would have taken me months to get through it, because like with a designer, especially, you don't get the opportunity to stay within a single like coding context. You have to like constantly switch, and I'm just terrible at retention. And so I've been trying to learn to code, like really code, for a decade, and I couldn't. I just had it's just every time I would lose the context whenever I'd have to like go somewhere else and work on a design thing for a month. And so the fact that like AI retains the context and like helps me sort of brute force my way to prototypes has been amazing. So I would say within the first 6 months of BasePaint, I went from CSS and pixels to like just coding features. So like people were asking for straight line tools and draggable palettes and all that stuff. And I was just like, started shipping that. So it has been amazing. It's been like the best thing that's happened to me in a long time.
And instead of thinking things at the code level, you're thinking of things like at a systems level. This needs to do this, so we probably need this to do that, and that will achieve this. And you're just kind of yelling at the AI, and the AI tries. And if you get a problem, you give it back to the AI, and it's kind of
yeah. It's, I mean, I'll be honest, it's like it's been very helpful. The decade that I've spent not learning to code, and like, you know, going through JavaScript, the good parts, and like all of these books that I've like reread and like redone, like I've built a to-do app 50 times. I've just like, it's been difficult.
It just doesn't stick.
It doesn't stick. So having that context and like understanding how that stuff works, having like the systems understanding of it, and then like being able to like turn to an AI and go like, okay, why don't you work on this while I fix this thing? It's been incredible. It's been so nice.
Awesome. Let's just to kind of, for fun, let's think of the systems real quick for a to-do list. Okay. Like basically how do we go about building it if we're prompting ChatGPT or a cursor or something?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, I mean, I would start with actually what I like doing is I like outlining with ChatGPT. I like outlining the end result, or like what we're the context around the use case before we start doing it, because then that starts narrowing down the technology choices. I've noticed that with ChatGPT and others, it doesn't it makes a lot of assumptions if you're not super if you don't like
clear on the tech you want to use and stuff or something.
Yeah. So like with the to-do list that I was kind of like with like the AI assisted to-do list, like I just started like, look, this is my day-to-day use case. I'm using it in this way. I want it to be all I want it to be accountless, but also reflecting across every open tab that I have, because that was like something that I would notice was a problem with like other products that I was using. Eventually we're going to think where I want to use it via you know, like make these API calls, etc. But currently, like like let's break it down. Like let's think in terms of like what's the first 2-3 steps that we should be thinking through.
So you're GPT to do the systems thinking for you, starting with the end use case and working backwards.
Yeah. And then like I mean, I don't know. I like the Socratic method of just like, let's talk. Basically, I even like preface it with like, let's not write any code. Don't write anything yet. I want to like talk about how it's going to work, and let's discuss like how it feels and looks first. And trade-offs. And then like it'll give me a breakdown of like, okay, well, we probably want this, or maybe we should think about this. And then I'll pick out 1 or 2 points, and I'll be like, okay, but like this is me. I'm the only user that I'm building this for right now. So like this isn't important. Is this overbuilt? Should we be thinking about it in this other way, etc. That to me is like, that's a really fun like way to kick off a project that I start with. And I start in ChatGPT. I have like a pro, not the expensive subscription. I have the cheap pro subscription. And I start a project within that so that I can kind of just keep a running conversation on the architecture. And then once I get to, and this is like changing all the time, but then like once I get it, I either like turn to cursor and start scaffolding it out, or I use the ChatGPT as like the initial like first splash of code, and then immediately move over to cursor, and then basically use cheap chat as like a almost as like a system architect, like co-builder, and then I use cursor as like code implementation, which is often like Claude.
I love how you say it's changing all the time too, because all of this stuff we're talking about didn't exist a few months ago, and what it will look
Dude.
like in another few months is going to be crazy. Like, nah, I just explained to my 6 AI agents what I wanted, and I fired the 5 that didn't do it right. And that's
Exactly.
how you make it.
Yeah, it's very simple. Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
It's
okay,
cool.
let's
It's crazy.
tangent to another hard question. Speaking of bringing ideas up and validating ideas,
Okay.
how and when do you know to let an idea go?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
At very different points. I think, how do you know when to let an idea go? Um, there's like 3 or 4 different ways in which to think about it. First off, I think about it in terms of like I have more ideas than I'm likely to get to in my lifetime. There will be things that are unbuilt by the time I die. Um, and so I try to maintain that perspective. And basically, I ask myself, like, when I get to a point and I'm asking myself, it's like it's taken up to a point, like a lot of times, like ideas, there's a, you hit a roadblock and you have one of two choices. You can like continue to bang your head on it and you can find that next leg up. And like that's like a lot of times that's where the unlock is, because everybody's thought about everything at a surface level, and where true greatness tends to come from is when you kind of like push past those like obvious roadblocks that stop 99.9% of people. um but I do try to like, I mean, again, Deadeye
Gotta have
PM
it.
CEO.
Yep.
There's like the cost benefit analysis. So
Yep.
like, okay, like 10x this, given the time that I think I'm going to spend on it, is the impact on me or the person that I want it to have, is it going to be as impactful as these like 5 or 10 other things that I could be working on right now? Um,
Yeah,
that's
value
how I
over
tend to think about
replacement
it.
kind of. Yeah.
Yeah,
Cool.
it's like it's a
Great.
really hard balance. Like it's a hard balance to strike, because again, greatness is usually in finding that idea and sticking with it longer than the average person. Um, but at the same time, right? Like you just have to ask yourself, like, if you're looking at something that's a 6 month build, and
Which is
you
crazy
have
these
10
days.
other ideas. Yeah, like you said, everything changes, right? Like crypto changes at the speed of light. The meta changes at the speed of light. AI is going to be changing at the speed of light. So if you can't build something in a month, then maybe put it in the background and let it percolate, and then like go pursue these other things. Because I also think it's important that like what you learn from these experiments stay with you. Even if something doesn't work out the way you want it to, you've learned so much. You have code that you can pull from. You have these like tricks that you kind of like discover within these different projects. And so I would say everything is a net positive, as you kind of like build more. To me, it's almost like it's like a gym day, man. Like it's just I look at it as like putting in the reps. It's kind of how I think about it.
That's a good way, good framing. Yeah. And really, there's not a great answer. There are times where you quest, and if
Yeah,
you just quested a little bit longer, you would have found the thing that made it all break loose. And there are times when you quest way too long and you finally throw it away and say, "Damn, why didn't I do that months ago?" But it's probably a case by case basis and something you need to do.
exactly. And there's like it's one of those things where like you don't have to throw, basically like putting setting it aside and going to build something else
Isn't it
doesn't
away? It's
mean,
just waiting. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
you're not deleting the repo. Like don't delete the repo. Don't kill
Yeah.
the thing,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like go find something else. And I think there's I would be very careful. I'm very careful to not throw away anything, because it's all probably going to be useful at some point. But I'm also not afraid to like back burner something, and go chase where my curiosity currently is, I guess I should say.
Heck yeah. Heck yeah. And we're seeing that. I feel like we're seeing that right now. I think Natter even had a tweet about that, about how, yes, there are these giant organizations that just have massive momentum. But if a single good builder can quickly pivot to the most important meta and build something quickly, like he's doing right now with AI agents, and just like
Yeah,
really focusing on that, you can have like hella impact. And I think it's awesome. This is the world we live in.
yep, I strongly agree with that. And there's like, I mean, it's incredible. There is when you find users, like we've talked a lot about like searching for users. When you find users, one of the ways that you keep them excited is by, and this is why I would say like, don't be so quick to put everything on chain or immutable, is the meta, changing the meta and innovating and kind of like collaborating with the users as they use it. Let that feed into what the next thing is and iterating with that. Like that's one of the ways that you keep people interested going forward. Like you look at like games like Overwatch, there's a meta, like there's seasons, there's metas, there's ways, strategies that work within like one context that don't necessarily work within the others. And you have to, if you can just like get out in front of what people are excited about and then give them the thing and then continue to surprise them and delight them, and like that aha moment from week 1 is not going to be the aha moment from week 3 or week 7. That's like really, like to me, like that's the cadence, like the shipping cadence that like I love. Like that to me is like the funnest part of building something.
That's powerful. That's awesome. So, okay. So in this quest to get users and how fun it is to get users, what are maybe some of the hard truths or maybe things that you wish you knew going into building things and having people use them that you didn't know at the beginning and you know now and you wish you could go back and tell yourself?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think when I look at the projects that were the most, I felt like it had the lowest ROI, right? If I put $1 in and I got a penny back, it would be the ones that I built to be the most fully featured and multifaceted.
Going back to simplicity.
Yeah,
like
I mean, like,
the most
yeah,
powerful. Okay.
you build it, right? Like you build this cathedral and then one person shows up. I think that to me has just that's been a really painful thing to learn. Like you put I think like as builders, it's impossible not to invest a lot of self into the things that we put out there. And I think like being cognizant that, there's only so many hours in the day, there's only so many days in the year, and like being hyper, like not falling in love with like the mythos of what it's going to feel like when a million people use it, but what one person feels whenever one person uses it, to me is like the best way to keep the scope down and keep kind of like the romance alive and like building this stuff. Cause I've like built a lot of things that nobody cares about. And so like the act of creation has to be fulfilling at a certain point. And then when you find that one person or 5 people or 10 people or 100 people, etc., like that is kind of like, that kind of like keeps you going.
So makes more simple things and keep the romance alive.
Yeah, basically.
I like
Yeah.
that. And it's,
Yeah.
I mean, it's specifically in our space, it's really hard to make something simple because things are so complex. You
Yes.
feel like if you try to ship something, and even there's this thing where you don't quite know everything. So your first instinct is to make it more complicated to prove
Yes.
that you know things. And that's
Yes.
actually like hurting you on all angles. And everyone can see it but you. But really, like you need to make something very simple. And if it's not simple, you're not there yet, probably.
100%. It's like basically what I feel like I have done in the past, what I see from other people as well as like what I've done and I still sometimes do, is red teaming, right? Like we always like to think about like the adversarial actor within the space and because that's just a fun mental game to play. And if that's what you want to get out of it, then that's great. But like someone asked me about putting chat in BasePaint, showing images
like a troll box. Oh, okay.
Yeah, like so in BasePaint we have a chat that people can collaborate, can type to each other and collaborate with each other. And that was there day one. It was really important. I have a lot of opinions on why that was really important. And we had no moderator tooling for that. And a friend of mine was like talking about like doing the same thing, and he was just like what moderator controls did you have for this thing? And it hadn't even launched yet for them, etc. And and I was like, we had nothing. It took 400 and something days before our first dick pic. Like
Yeah.
Like someone red teaming something, like having a bad actor is an amazing problem to have. So build something that's flexible in order to like pivot when they come versus trying to solve every bad actor problem before you even launch.
Yep. That's great. Get to market, do things simple, don't overthink
Yeah.
it. Yep. With Nifty Inc., we were like, well, we're going to pay for everyone's transactions to draw things
Yeah.
on chain. We're definitely just going to see all dicks. And it wasn't all dicks. It was
Exactly.
all scribbles and squabbles and fun artists and stuff, but it wasn't a bunch of dicks. And it was really surprising, actually, when we launched it. We
Yeah,
surprised
exactly.
ourselves.
People
Yeah.
people are good. I would let people surprise you, pleasantly surprise you.
That's great. Okay. This one's existential.
Oh no.
What kinds of things actually need the hardness of a blockchain? Why do we need nation state level hardness? What kinds of things actually belong on this chain?
That's a great question. I actually have a squishier answer than I did
Squishy's good.
Yeah, 2 or 3 years ago. Because I used to think that like none of this needs a blockchain, except for like very like your bank account needs a blockchain, kind of, but even that, there's something really powerful about ownership. It's called the endowment effect. It's like people value something. Like if you have a coffee cup, you would price it at $1, but as soon as you give them the coffee cup and say this is your coffee cup, they look at it and they price it at like $2 or $3. It's human psychology to have to value something more when they own it versus whenever they don't. And so I think that there's a really interesting. I don't think it's been fully explored because again, there's reasons why people don't like really normies don't understand that like when it's your private, your keys, your Bored Ape,
Even just
your
like
picture.
owning digital assets is
Yeah,
not like clear right away.
it's not clear right away, but at the same time, like that was to me, it was like one of like the big aha moments was like it was like 2018. Had some USDC in wallet A, sent it to wallet B, and just watched it appear in the other thing like magic. And it was just like, whoa, that's really cool. And so the squishy answer is essentially like when you need an open database that is accessible anywhere, I think it's worth at least like looking at it because you get so many really interesting aspects within like this idea of ownership, this idea of interoperability. It becomes a bit of like a lotus eater type trap if you think too much about that interoperability and you expect everybody to build off of it. It needs to be satisfying if you're the only person that builds off of it. But to even like open the door and like have that, especially with like layer twos like base, and Polygon and everything, like there's just like the UX, to me, the UX has gotten so good.
Smart
With
contract
these
wallets on top of that too. Like
yeah,
you pass key in with a fingerprint and can do anything. Just
yeah,
like all
like
your other apps these days.
it's so cool. And like honestly, like to me, account management is like the 10x for crypto. I resent it whenever I have to give someone an email address now because
Oh
I'm just
man, it's
like,
so lame.
great.
If you're a
Exactly.
crypto app and you make me put in an email, I usually
Oh yeah,
close
no,
it.
don't even, that's the worst thing in the world. And
Yeah.
that's like we're like taking the worst parts of Web 2 and then hobbling the only
Bring
thing
it
that we
back.
got right.
Run it
Yeah,
back.
the only thing we got right is
Yeah.
log in within a wallet, and now we're like doing the worst parts of Web 2 just for stickiness or whatever. It's a terrible idea. But yeah, like I resent it anytime I have to put in an email. And so like yeah, having accounts right out of the box is insanely cool. Having shared state with everybody, insanely cool. This is the artist in me saying like these are really cool concepts that I feel like are still crazy underexplored. So long as you're thinking about building toys and not necessarily like, I don't know, the next Amazon. Like I think that's like to me, like that's where like the state of play is right now for me.
A lot of people are like, we're going to put Uber on chain. And it's just like, no, maybe not. Maybe that's not the
Yeah,
right. Yeah. Yep.
maybe
But
not.
however, like what if we put parts of the United States government on chain and we
On
have this
chain.
accountability layer for a world accountability government? That actually starts to
Exactly.
make sense. Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, like, and I think, like, I mean, let's start small. Let's put a car that two drivers share on train.
Yeah, there
Right?
you go.
Like,
Yeah, instead of
let's
the
turn a
Uber.
car into a
Yep.
DAO. And like, to me, that's actually really interesting. And like kind of an underexplored aspect. So yeah, like I think if these models are going to work at the macro, they have to first work at the micro. And I don't think we've thought small enough and experimental enough to discover the right modes that
Like, shout out
are
Small
good.
Brain. We haven't
Huh?
thought small enough yet.
Yeah.
Small Brain Games. I love
Yeah.
his
Oh my
his
God.
idea. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
He's
Okay.
so good.
So existential question about, what is a blockchain for? How about the existential question of, is it only for a few elite cracked devs to be making smart contracts, or can anyone make a smart contract?
Well, I'm not a dev, so
Okay.
I can't answer this question. Like, this is not for me to answer. This is for you to answer, sir. My personal preference is that everyone should be writing, playing with smart contracts. Like, it's an insane if you've written React and like all this other crap, I far prefer the Solidity stuff. Solidity is far more legible than your average React app. So it's an easier thing to like kind of like leap into. And there's something incredible. Like I talk again, right? Like endowment ownership. The first time I put first time I pushed code that I knew was going to live on a whole bunch of different nodes for the rest of at least that chain's life was like incredibly powerful. I'm like, oh my God, like I put this thing here and anyone can interact with it via ABI Ninja or Etherscan or whatever for like well after I'm dead, and like I stop paying my Versal bills or whatever. Like that's cool. So yeah, I don't know. Like you tell me, man. I'm shipping dangerous Solidity code, but maybe that's a bad idea.
There we go. If you're willing to ship dangerous Solidity code, I think that's so many good mental models here. Just about starting simple and focusing on that first person, focusing on their experience and working backwards and being able to pivot with the meta. A lot of really awesome stuff here. Okay, last question is a cheesy one. What is your superpower?
Oh, I don't have one. I feel like my superpower is that I have a different enough I'm kind of like a jack of all trades, master of none. And so I do feel like I am able, creativity, making something new, you're never really making something out of whole cloth. You're finding disparate elements that have never been put together before, and you're putting them together. And so I do feel like I have I was very fortunate to have a lot of different friends and mentors who are interested in doing very different things. And so I feel like I have, when I draw on experiences and mental models, I have more than someone who has been like hyper focused on one thing or the other. And so I feel like that's what I bring to kind of like partnerships and collaborations, is like the ability to find very different things from very different areas and push them into a single pile that looks kind of novel and interesting.
Awesome. That's great. No, just like a breadth of context and being able to know the tools in the toolbox and put them together in different contexts. I really like that.
Yeah.
Hell yeah. All right, man. Thank you so much. Freaking PMFers, number 2, Zach Herring. Thank you for being here.
I'm thrilled.